Welcome back to a brand new unit of Virginia Studies, friends. If you recall, you have learned all about how North America was discovered by Europeans and how England, France, and Spain were in a fight for money and power for hundreds of years. By the 1600s, all three had settled in parts of North America, with England's first permanent settlement being in Virginia. You have explored the relationship between the English and the Native Americans and learned how the English were eventually able to thrive in the new colonies despite many challenges. In today's video, we are going to be jumping ahead a little over 100 years to see what was going on in North America. Before we begin, our learning target for today is to be able to explain events which caused unrest in the colonies. And as you watch and take notes, there are three important vocabulary words to keep in mind. They are one, revolution, which is a sudden change in political power when the people revolt against the government. Two, parliament, a group of people who participate in the ruling of a country and make laws. And three, militia, a group of local civilians trained as soldiers who serve in emergencies. The 130 plus years between where we left off and where we are picking up were relatively peaceful and extremely successful. The British colonies made tons of money selling tobacco. They had working local governments and were able to overcome tensions with the Native American tribes nearby. It was such a success, in fact, that Virginia was no longer the only colony. There were 12 more up and down the East Coast. As a result of their success, for the most part, the King of England and Parliament left the colonies alone. This worked well for both parties. Great Britain had successfully increased its territory and was profiting off its success. And the colonists were able to create a life for themselves while keeping their British citizenship and the protection of the British Army. During that time, multiple generations had been born in the colonies, and now most of the colonists had never even visited Great Britain. Take a look at this map real quick. First of all, this is a modern map of North America, but with the territory lines from the year 1750. Using the legend, we can see that the British claimed much of the East Coast and northern Canada by 1750, and the French had successfully claimed Middle America, while Spain had settled in the southernmost parts of modern-day United States and Mexico. If you look closely, you will notice some land between the French and British, which was disputed. This is important for where we are going next. As the population grew in the colonies, their land needed to expand with them. Naturally, the colonists began exploring land to the west. However, Spain and France had settled significant portions of North America by this point as well. Think back to the previous map. As colonists from the three countries encountered each other, they began to fight over who should get the land. To add to the problem, all three countries were creating conflict with those people who were indigenous to the land, the Native Americans. All of these small skirmishes were about to lead to a much bigger fight. By 1754, war was imminent between the British and the French, and a single fight would lead to years of war. It all came down to the fertile land in the Ohio River Valley, which both countries claimed was theirs. This led to a very large skirmish and the start of the French and Indian War. Leading the British militia was young 21-year-old George Washington. When war broke out, the Native Americans were forced to take sides. Many felt that the French were the better bet because they were more interested in trading furs than setting up permanent settlements. However, the various tribes largely chose the opposite side of their enemy tribes. Ultimately, this war was fought with the British, the colonists, and the Iroquois Confederacy on one side, and the French and all of the Iroquois' enemies on the other side. This war raged on for years, 9 years to be exact. They fought from the Carolinas all the way up into modern day Canada. For the bulk of that time, the French won every battle. But the King of England would not stand to lose land. So he and Parliament invested more money than they had to send soldiers, weapons, and other supplies to the colonists. It paid off, though, in a decisive battle in September 1759. The battle, which took place in Quebec, Canada, crushed the French army. It would be several years later, in 1763, before the French officially surrendered to Great Britain, and the maps changed to show the increased British territory. After the war was won, there was still a massive problem. Great Britain had gone into great debt to finance this war, and they now had more territory, which cost more money to maintain. So, how would they pay off the country's debt and budget for the additional costs of maintaining new territory? Easy. Anytime a government needs money, it taxes its citizens. That's only fair, right? That is exactly how the king and parliament felt. The British government had spent all that money to defend the colonies, so the colonies should help pay back that debt. So if the colonies are being taxed now, the next questions we need to ask are how much British citizens were being taxed and how the colonists reacted to these new taxes. We will explore all that and so much more in the next lesson. All right, y'all, you know the drill. If you can answer the next two questions, you're ready to move on. If not, rewatch the lesson to find the answers and have a great day. Number one, what was the result of the French and Indian War? And number two, how did the British Parliament want to pay off their debt?